You're watching Noir Street. I'm your host, Nero Wolfe. Every story hides a secret, and every shadow hides a clue. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. Subscribe, tap the like button, and join us as we drift into mystery. Chapter 1. The vanishing that looked too neat a prominent lawyer. Grant Heller disappears with the tidy precision of a man filing his own life away. His wife insists he was afraid. His law partner insists he was triumphant, and neither sounds rehearsed. A briefcase appears at a bus terminal, like a staged confession meant for strangers, not truth. Wolfe decides it's voluntary, which means motive, timetable, and an audience the vanisher can't control. And when a vanishing has an audience, someone is always in danger of becoming the next act. The bitter edge of March had New York behaving like an old man with a grudge. Wind that cut corners, damp that climbed your collar, and a sky the color of used dishwater. Wolfe had declared it an insult to orchids, which was his way of declaring it an insult to civilization, and he had been brooding in his office with a book on horticulture that he wasn't reading. I was doing what I do best when Wolfe is brooding: paperwork, phone calls, and an occasional glance at the red leather chair to make sure it didn't look too comfortable. Fritz had just set a tray on the side table. Coffee for me, hot chocolate for Wolfe, because Wolfe calls it a beverage of childhood, and drinks it like a man making a point. When the doorbell rang, it rang again quick, as if the visitor feared he might be refused by the laws of physics. Fritz went to answer, returned and said, "Archie, there is a lady. She is very certain." Wolfe didn't lift his eyes. Certainty is not a credential. "She is dressed as if it is," I said, because Fritz's tone had already told me she wasn't a girl from the corner bakery. "Send her in." She came in like a well-funded lawsuit, tall, controlled, and expensive without being showy. Her hair was dark and arranged with the kind of care that survives emotion. Her coat was good wool, her gloves were good leather, and her eyes were the kind that had read too many documents and not enough faces. She stopped just inside the office, took in Wolfe's bulk behind the desk, and then looked at me as if I were an inconvenience she would tolerate for the sake of the main event. "You are Nero Wolfe," she said. Wolfe's eyes rose at last. I am Paige Celeste Heller," she said. "My husband is missing." Wolfe's mouth tightened slightly, not with sympathy, but with irritation at the idea that the world kept misplacing husbands and then expecting him to pick them up. "Sit, Mrs. Heller," he said, "and be exact." She sat on the yellow chair as if it had been offered by a judge, not a detective. Her hands were steady on her lap, but her throat moved when she swallowed. "My husband is Grant Heller," she said. "He is an attorney. He left our house yesterday morning at 8:30 and did not arrive at his office. By noon I had called his partner. By 2 o'clock I had called the police. By nightfall they were treating it as—" She paused, and the steadiness slipped just enough to show fear, "as a disappearance." "Disappearance is a description," Wolfe said, "not an explanation." Her eyes held his. "Then explain it." Wolfe's expression did not change. "I will hear it first." She took a breath that sounded like she was about to recite a deposition, which was promising. "Grant has never missed work," she said. "Not once in our marriage. He is methodical. He keeps lists. He keeps schedules. He keeps his life arranged," I murmured. "That's a lovely way to say he's a nuisance." She ignored me. "Yesterday morning he was not himself." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "In what way?" "He was careful," she said, and then corrected herself quickly. "More careful than usual. He checked the locks twice." He stood by the front window and watched the street as if expecting someone to step out of the air. When I asked what was wrong, he said only, "It will be over soon." Wolfe's gaze stayed steady. "Did he say what it was?" "Number, he never tells me anything important until it is already decided." That line sounded true in a domestic, tired way. "He left at 8:30, she continued. "He wore his gray suit. He took his briefcase. He kissed me." Her voice caught for the first time. "He never kisses me in the morning," he said. "Don't call anyone until noon." And then he left. Wolfe leaned back slightly. "And you called at noon?" "Yes," she said, and her chin lifted with something like pride. "At 12:05. "Reasonable," Wolfe conceded, which from him was almost a compliment. "You called his office, he was not there." "Number, you called his partner?" "Yes." "And the police?" "Yes." Wolfe's eyes moved to me. "Goodwin, note the instruction, do not call until noon. That is not the behavior of a man who is abducted at 8:30. I noted it the minute she said it. I replied, "It's practically engraved." Paige Heller's eyes flicked toward me, sharp. "Are you saying he left willingly?" Wolfe's voice was mild. "I am saying nothing yet. Continue." She tightened her fingers together once, then forced them apart as if to keep control. "Last night," she said, "a briefcase was found at the Port Authority bus terminal. That got my attention. Things found at terminals are usually either lost or planted, and neither category is comforting. It was my husband's briefcase," she said. "His initials are inside the flap. It contained 3 items, a paperback novel, a packet of documents that appear to be copies of old deeds, and a single subway card." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "No money, no passport, no keys." "No," she said, "and no phone." Wolfe looked at her for a long beat. "Who found it?" "The police," she said. "A maintenance worker reported it. The police called me because my husband's business card was inside." Wolfe made a small sound. "How considerate." Her gaze tightened. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Wolfe said, "that your husband's business card inside the briefcase is an announcement. It is intended to direct attentions." She stiffened. "Toward him." "Toward the narrative," Wolfe corrected. "Tell me about the deeds." "They are copies," she said. "Old property deeds in Queens. A few in Brooklyn names I don't recognize. But Grant," she hesitated, then admitted, "Grant has been involved in a dispute lately. A client accused him of manipulating a will." Ah, there it was. The neat vanishing with the neat complication. Wolfe's eyes were half-lidded now, interested despite himself. "Name of the client." She hesitated again, then said, "Mrs. Lorna Braddock. Her father died last fall. Grant handled the estate. She claims the will was altered." "And was it?" Wolfe asked. Celeste Heller's lips tightened. "Number, that is an answer of loyalty," Wolfe said. "Not of evidence." She flushed slightly, but her voice stayed controlled. "Grant is not corrupt." "Corruption is rarely announced," Wolfe said. "It is discovered. What occurred with Mrs. Braddock?" "She threatened him," Celeste said. "She came to the house 2 weeks ago. She said she would ruin him. She said she had proof. Grant told her to leave and she laughed at him. After that he became distracted. He began taking calls in the study and refusing to tell me who it was." Wolfe nodded once. "His partner name?" "Douglas Rist." Wolfe's eyes flicked to me again. "Telephone Mr. Rist, Mr. Goodwin, invite him here at once." I reached for the phone, but Celeste Heller spoke quickly. "He will come," she said. "He came to see me this morning." Wolfe's gaze returned to her. "And he said Grant had been confident," she said. "He said Grant had been almost cheerful. He said Grant told him yesterday, 'By tomorrow, this will be behind us.'" Wolfe's lips pressed together, curious. I said, "Your husband tells you he's frightened, and tells his partner he's confident." Paige's head snapped toward me. "He did not tell me he was frightened." "You said he watched the street and checked locks," I reminded her. "That's fear in a gray suit." Wolfe held up a finger. I shut up. "Mrs. Heller," Wolfe said, "your husband has disappeared with the kind of care that screams preparation, not panic." Her eyes widened slightly at his bluntness. "A man who is abducted does not request a delay in notification," Wolfe continued. "A man who flees does. A man who intends to vanish arranges a scene, an abandoned briefcase, a business card, a subway card, as if placing props on a stage." Paige Heller's face went pale. "He would not leave me." Wolfe's voice remained calm. "People do many things they would not do. Until they do them. She gripped the arms of the chair, knuckles whitening. Then why? Why would he do this? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Because intent always has a schedule. Your husband said, "It will be over soon." He told his partner, "By tomorrow, this will be behind us." That suggests a deadline, a meeting, a transaction, or a threat with an expiration, I said. And the briefcase at Port Authority suggests he wanted the world to think he boarded a bus. Wolfe nodded. Yes, but a staged item at a terminal is not meant for truth. It is meant for witnesses. Page's voice trembled. What witnesses? Wolfe's gaze was steady. Whoever is watching him, whoever would be satisfied by the appearance of flight. She stared. You think someone forced him to fake it? I think, Wolfe said, that your husband is either the author or the actor. In either case, the plot is precise. That precision can be exploited. Fritz appeared at the door with a small nod. Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Rist is on the telephone. He says it is urgent. Wolfe's eyelids lowered. Put him through. Fritz handed Wolfe. The receiver, Wolfe listened. Face unreadable, then he spoke. Voice clipped. Mr. Rist, you will come to my house immediately. Yes, now, bring whatever papers you consider pertinent. No, I do not care about your appointments. He hung up and handed the receiver back to Fritz as if it had offended him. Page Heller watched him, then looked at me. Will you find him? I'll do my best, I said. But Wolfe doesn't find people. He corners explanations. Wolfe's eyes flicked toward me, a warning, then returned to her. Mrs. Heller, he said, you will answer one more question. Did your husband have enemies who are not clients? She hesitated. Enemies. Wolfe's voice stayed even. Money affairs, old grudges, anything that produces leverage. Her lips pressed together. Grant is meticulous. He does not have affairs. That is not what I asked, Wolfe said. She exhaled, defeated by his patience. He has a brother, Neil. They do not speak. There was a dispute over their father's business. Grant cut him off. Wolfe nodded slowly. Address. I don't know, she admitted. I haven't seen him in years. Wolfe looked at me. Goodwin, already, I said, and made a note. Brothers have a way of turning up when money gets nervous. Page Heller stood, as if she couldn't bear sitting under Wolfe's analysis any longer. Mr. Wolfe, she said, voice tight. If my husband is doing this voluntarily, if he is running, then he is in danger, isn't he? Wolfe's eyes held hers. If he is running from something. That something is usually more dangerous than the running itself. She swallowed. Then please. Wolfe's tone softened a fraction, which for him is like lowering a sledgehammer gently. If your husband contacts you, you will inform me immediately, and you will keep him talking as long as possible. Her eyes widened. He might contact me. Wolfe's voice was certain. A voluntary vanishing leaves fingerprints of intent. Intent needs reassurance. Reassurance comes from home. She nodded, stiff, and turned to go. At the door she paused and looked back, the control cracking just enough to show the raw edge beneath. Mr. Goodwin, she said quietly, if you think he chose this, tell me, don't let me wait in a lie. I wanted to tell her something comforting. Wolfe wanted me not to. I compromised by saying, I'll tell you what I know when I know it. She left. The office was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that makes you hear the building's bones. Wolfe sat back, fingers steepled, eyes distant. Fritz cleared the tray as if removing evidence of normality. I said, so he ran. Wolfe's eyes shifted to me. Perhaps. That's not an answer. It is the only honest one, Wolfe said. We have a staged briefcase at a bus terminal, which indicates misdirection. We have a wife who witnessed fear and a partner who witnessed confidence. We have a client dispute over a will, old property deeds, and a brother with a grievance. That is not one problem, Archie. That is an intersection. Grit 8, I said. Which way do we cross without being hit? Wolfe's mouth tightened. By locating the schedule, the doorbell rang again. One sharp ring this time. Confident, not frantic. Fritz went to answer, and I heard voices in the hall. Then Fritz returned with a man behind him. Douglas Rist entered, as if he owned the air, which told me he was either a senior partner or a man practicing to become one. He was in his mid-40s, neat suit, neat hair, and a face trained to look reasonable in court. In his hand he carried a legal folder, held tight enough to wrinkle. He saw Wolfe, saw me, and then saw the empty chair where Celeste had been. His expression tightened. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "thank you for seeing me. This is," he swallowed, "this is bad." Wolfe gestured. "Sit, Mr. Rist, and be exact." Rist sat. His eyes flicked to the folder, then back to Wolfe. "Grant didn't just vanish," he said. "He left something behind. Not at the terminal, at the office, in my desk." Wolfe's eyelids lowered. "What?" Rist opened the folder and produced a single sheet of paper. He slid it across Wolfe's desk. I leaned to see it. It was typed, brief and brutally neat. "If I am not in my office by noon tomorrow. Open file Harbor Light. Do not call Celeste. Do not call police. Call Nero Wolfe." Wolfe read it once, then again, and his mouth became a thin line. I looked up at Rist. He planned this. Rist's voice was tight, or he knew something was coming. Wolfe placed the paper flat on his blotter as if pinning a specimen. "Mr. Rist," he said quietly, "what is Harbor Light?" Rist hesitated. Wolfe's eyes hardened. "If you prevaricate, you will depart, and you will not enjoy the consequences." Rist swallowed. "It's an escrow arrangement. A private account. Grant handled it personally. I didn't like it." "And why?" Wolfe asked. "Did you not like it?" Rist's face tightened. "Because the money in it wasn't clean." Wolfe's gaze held him. "Whose money?" Rist's throat bobbed. "I don't know. Grant wouldn't tell me. He said it was temporary and necessary, and that it would be resolved by tomorrow." Wolfe leaned back, eyes narrowed with satisfaction that looked like annoyance. "So, a schedule," I said, "and tomorrow's noon is the bell." Wolfe's voice was flat. "Yes, and if we miss it, someone else will ring it." Rist's hands trembled slightly now. "Mr. Wolfe, if this involves laundering or fraud, it involves danger," Wolfe corrected. "Fraud is merely the costume." He looked at me. "Goodwin, get your coat." I stood. "Where to?" Wolfe's eyes were steady. "To the Port Authority terminal. I wish to see how neatly the vanishing was arranged." And then, his gaze shifted to Rist. "To your office. I wish to see the file named Harbor Light." Rist's face drained of color. "You can't." "I can," Wolfe said. "You requested me. You will now cooperate." I went to the hall for my coat, and as I did I felt that familiar tightening in my stomach that comes when Wolfe finds a thread and decides to pull until the whole garment comes apart. Because when a man vanishes too neatly, it's never because he wants to be found. It's because someone wants him gone on time. Chapter 2, The Clues of a Chosen Exit. I follow Hella's trail through places that sell disappearance by the hour, lockers, photo booths, and clerks who forget faces on purpose. Each clue is innocent alone, but together they form a tune, planned, paced, and paid in cash. Kramer calls it routine until a ransom note arrives that asks for no money at all. Wolfe names it a timeline knot. Someone is controlling not only where Hella went, but when we're allowed to know it. And if the schedule is the weapon, the next cut will come exactly on time. If you want to learn how a man vanishes in New York, you don't start with poets or criminals. You start with clerks. Wolfe sent me out after we got the Harbor Light note from Douglas Rist, and he did it with that calm certainty he uses when ordering Fritz to adjust the heat. I didn't argue. Arguing with Wolfe only wastes breath that could be used later to explain why you did something foolish. The Port Authority bus terminal is the city's idea of a stomach, always digesting crowds, always sour, always full of noises that never turn into meaning. I went there first, because the briefcase had been left there like a prop with a label on it. A lieutenant in transit police, square jaw and tired eyes. Let me see the found property report. He also let me see the exact spot where the briefcase had been discovered. Under a bench near the gates, placed neatly, not shoved, not kicked, like someone setting down a hat. You want a face by a miracle. I bought nothing, but I took names. The maintenance man who reported it, the officer who logged it, the time stamped on the report. The time mattered. From Port Authority. I went to Heller's office. Reist and Heller, a midtown suite that smelled of ink, leather chairs, and quiet ambition. Douglas Rist met me in the hall with the look of a man who was regretting every word he had ever said to a partner. "You'll find nothing," he muttered. "That's why I'm here," I told him. "Nothing is always something." He gave me Heller's private office. It was tidy, too tidy, the kind of tidy that suggests either a man with habits or a man leaving evidence of habits. I checked the desk drawers, the file cabinets, the wastebasket. The wastebasket was empty and lined with a fresh bag. "That's considerate," I said. Rice didn't smile. "Our cleaning crew." "Sure," I said, "and I'm the Archbishop." I opened the file marked Harbor Light. It was thin, a bank contact, an escrow reference number, a list of 3 names, none familiar, and one address written in Heller's hand, a storage facility in Long Island City. Cash disappears into storage units, the way sins disappear into churches. I drove to Long Island City and found the place. Harbor Safe Storage, gray building, cheerful sign, dead-eyed receptionist. At the counter, a young woman with red nails and a bored expression asked for my name. I gave it Archie Goodwin and watched her face for recognition. Nothing. Good. "I'm looking for a unit rented by Grant Heller," I said. She blinked. "Can't give that out." "I'm not asking you to give it out," I said. "I'm asking you to tell me if he rented one yesterday." She shrugged. "People rent units every day yesterday morning." I pressed. "Cash." Her bored look twitched. "Cash," she repeated, as if the word had weight. That was enough. I slid a bill across the counter, not as a bribe. Wolfe hates bribes, but as a lubricant. She covered it with her hand without changing expression. "We had a new unit yesterday," she said softly. "Paid in cash. Name on the form was Grant Heller." "Show me the signature," I said. She hesitated, then pulled a clipboard from beneath the counter and flipped to a page. Heller's name was printed neatly. The signature was neat too neat. A lawyer's hand, yes, but the curves looked practiced, like someone copying a sample. "Id?" I asked. She nodded. "Driver's license. Looked real." "Looked," I said. "And the unit number?" "Can't," she said, reflex. I leaned closer. "You already did." Her eyes darted. Then she whispered, "B, -14. I didn't ask to see inside. If Heller or someone using Heller's name had rented a unit, the unit would either be empty by now or booby, trapped with paperwork. Either way, opening it without Wolfe's plan would be like reaching into a sack labeled snakes. I left and drove back toward Manhattan, stopping once at a small passport photo shop near Queens Plaza, one of those places with a booth, a bored operator, and a curtain that smells like 1,000 anxious faces. The operator was a thin man with glasses and a memory trained to forget. I showed him Grant Heller's photo from the firm's website. He stared, then shrugged. "Maybe." "Yesterday," I said. "Cash passport photos." His shrug softened into recognition. A man came. "Yes, suit. Hair neat." He asked for passport size. He paid cash. "Was it him?" I asked. The operator leaned closer, squinting. "Looked like him, but he didn't smile." "People don't smile for passports," I said. "He didn't blink," the operator corrected, like he was practicing being someone else. That was good, clean poison. Next stop was the phone company office. Because the easiest way to vanish is to make sure no one can call you, with a little persuasion and a little official sounding tone. I learned Heller's private line had been cancelled that same morning, requested at 9:30, effective immediately. Requested by whom, the clerk couldn't say, but she did say the cancellation had been confirmed by security question. Which meant somebody knew the answer, By the time I got back to the brownstone, dusk had turned the streetlights on and made the wind feel sharper. Wolfe was in his office, as always with Fritz setting out dinner and pretending he wasn't listening. I reported. The storage unit paid in cash, the passport photo, the phone line cancelled on schedule. Wolfe listened, eyes half-lidded, absorbing each detail as if it were a course on a menu. When I finished, Wolfe said, "None of this proves flight." "No," I agreed, "but together it sings the same song." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "A planned disappearance, which implies either consent or coercion." The doorbell rang. Fritz went, returned and handed Wolfe a plain envelope without a word. Wolfe took it with 2 fingers as if it might stain him. He opened it, removed a single sheet, and read. His eyes changed, not startled, but sharpened, like a blade being honed. Kramer arrived. 10 minutes later, loud enough to shake dust out of the wallpaper. He came into the office, saw Wolfe holding the paper, and said, "All right. What you got? Because now it's not routine." "Routine," I said. "That didn't last." Kramer glared at me and then looked at Wolfe. "We got a note too," he said. "A ransom note, except it doesn't ask for money." Wolfe held up the sheet. We received the same document. Kramer snatched it when Wolfe offered it. He read, lips moving, then looked up, face dark. The note said, "Do not contact any agency after 12 o'clock noon tomorrow. Deliver the Harbor Light file to locker 17, gate level, Port Authority, 12:10 p.m. Come alone. No money, no tricks. If you are late, Mr. Heller will remain where he is." Kramer slapped the paper against his palm. "No money," he barked. "What kind of ransom is that?" Wolfe's voice was calm. "A ransom of control." Kramer scowled. "You think you're clever?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "No, Inspector, I think they are. This is not about payment. It is about timing." He tapped the noon instruction with a thick finger. Mr. Heller told his wife not to call until noon. Mr. Rist was told not to call anyone. Now this note orders no contact after noon and sets a delivery at 12:10. It is a timeline knot, tightened around our necks. Kramer's jaw worked. "So we set a trap at Port Authority. We grab whoever shows." Wolfe's gaze stayed steady. "If you do that crudely, you will get a messenger. The author will remain invisible." Kramer started to argue, then stopped. He didn't like Wolfe, but he disliked being wrong more. Wolfe looked at me. "Mr. Goodwin, tomorrow at noon, someone will attempt to control the clock. I intend to take the clock away from them." I said, "And how do we do that?" Wolfe's eyes held mine. "By discovering what is inside Harbor Light that frightens a man into vanishing on schedule." And in the stillness after he said it, I realized the briefcase at the terminal wasn't the message at all. It was the practice run. Chapter 3. The body that ruined the story. Grant Heller turns up dead in a rented room over a shuttered pharmacy, as if someone filed him away and forgot the receipt. The room is scrubbed, the window latched, and the wall clock is stopped at 2:17, like a caption under a photograph. 2 witnesses swear they saw him alive after his vanishing, and their alibis are solid enough to bruise a prosecutor. Wolfe accepts the proofs, then rejects the easy conclusion, because solid proofs mean the timeline is the lie. If the time of death is wrong, then the killer wasn't hiding from clocks. He was using them. The Port Authority drop was supposed to happen at 12:10 the next day, and Wolfe was supposed to attend it in spirit, while I attended it in person, since Wolfe's spirit has a wider range than his legs. We had arranged it with all the care we could manage, without giving Kramer a chance to improve it with loud policemen and brighter badges. But the city does not always respect schedules, not even criminal ones. Sometimes it interrupts. At 10:30 that morning, Fritz came into the office while Wolfe was in the middle of inspecting a Cattleya orchid with the suspicious tenderness he reserves for anything living and silent. "Mr. Wolfe," Fritz said, voice even. "Inspector Kramer is on the telephone. He says it is urgent." Wolfe sighed, which was his way of expressing contempt for the modern world. He took the receiver. "Inspector," he said. "Yes, Yes, no, I will not. Then he stopped talking. Wolfe doesn't stop talking often. When he does, you listen. He listened for a long moment, eyes fixed on nothing, and when he finally spoke, his voice had turned colder. Where? He asked. When? I see. Irrelevant. Wolfe. The note. The note, Wolfe said, has been superseded by a corpse. That is a sentence you can't ignore. Kramer was waiting for us at the curb in front of an address that had once been respectable and was now merely stubborn, a 3-story brick building on West 121st, with a closed pharmacy on the ground floor. Its sign hung crooked, the windows were papered over, and the whole place looked like it had decided to stop contributing to society. Kramer didn't bother with greetings. He jabbed a thumb toward the stairs. Up there, he growled. Rented room, dead man. Wolfe's lips tightened. You are certain it is Grant Heller? Kramer's face darkened. You think I don't know what a prominent lawyer looks like? Yeah, it's him, unless he's got a twin who likes cheap rooms and dying. Wolfe moved toward the stairs with the dignity of a man entering a theater. He would rather not patronize. I followed because dignity doesn't solve anything unless someone is there to carry the evidence. The stairwell smelled of old cooking and damp plaster. On the second floor, a uniformed cop stood by an open door, trying not to look curious. Inside was a room with a narrow bed, a small table, a sink, and one chair. It was the kind of place you rent when you want privacy more than comfort. Grant Heller lay on the bed. On his back, hands at his sides, suit jacket neatly folded on the chair as if he had intended to rise and put it on again. His face was pale, mouth slightly open, eyes closed with an expression that was almost peaceful, which in a dead man usually means someone took care. The room was clean, not merely tidy clean. The bedspread was smooth. The wastebasket was empty. The floor had no dust in the corners. It looked as if someone had rented the room for the sole purpose of having it photographed. On the wall above the table was a cheap clock, the kind you can buy in a drugstore for $6. Its hands were stopped at 2:17. Kramer pointed at it. Cute, huh? Like the killer wants us to know the time. Wolfe's eyes lingered on the clock without expression, or wants you to believe it. The medical examiner, a round man with cold hands and a bored voice, stepped forward. No obvious wounds, he said. Could be poisoning, could be suffocation. I'll know more after. Kramer snorted. We got a witness, says he heard a thump at 2. Something, and there's that clock. So, Wolfe lifted a hand. Kramer stopped talking, which was a minor miracle. Wolfe said quietly, Inspector, has anyone touched that clock? The uniformed cop shifted. No, sir. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Has anyone opened the window? Number it's latched. Wolfe stepped closer to the window. It was shut tight, latch engaged, no sign of prying. He looked at the sill and frame with the patience of a man checking an orchid's leaves for disease. Then he stepped back and looked at the room again, not at Heller, but at the arrangement, the folded jacket, the empty wastebasket, the spotless floor, the stopped clock. This is staged, Wolfe said. Kramer bristled. Staged? The guy's dead. Yes, Wolfe replied. Precisely. Kramer glared. You think he was killed somewhere else and brought here? Wolfe's eyes stayed calm. It is possible. But I prefer not to guess when facts are available. He turned slightly toward the medical examiner. Doctor, approximate time of death. The examiner shrugged. Hard to say without a full exam. Rigors mild, could be last night, could be early this morning. The room's warm, that complicates it. I'd say 12 to 18 hours. Kramer nodded as if that settled it. So he died overnight. Clock says 2:17. Fine. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. No, Inspector, not fine. Kramer's face reddened. What now? Now, Wolfe said. We consider the inconvenient fact that 2 people have already told you they saw Grant Heller alive after his disappearance. Kramer's mouth twisted. Yeah, and both are probably lying. Wolfe's eyes were flat. Both are not. Kramer blinked. What? I said. He means the alibis check. Kramer scowled. We haven't checked anything. You will, Wolfe said, and you will find their proofs real. Kramer's eyes narrowed. Who are they? Mrs. Lorna Braddock, Wolfe said, and Mr. Neil Heller. That got a reaction. Kramer's eyebrows rose. His brother. Mrs. Braddock claims she confronted him in her attorney's office at 4 o'clock, 2 days after his disappearance. She has a receptionist, a security log, and a building camera that captures her arrival and departure. Kramer's jaw tightened, and the brother, Mr. Neil Heller, claims he met Grant Heller at a coffee shop in Astoria at 6 o'clock that same evening. Wolfe said. He has a cashier who remembers the argument, a receipt time-stamped, and if your department is competent, a street camera across the intersection. Kramer stared. How the hell do you know that? Wolfe's voice was dry. Because I asked questions while you called it routine. Kramer growled, but he was thinking now, and thinking is dangerous for a man who prefers shouting. So if they saw him alive after he vanished, Kramer said slowly, then he wasn't dead, he was just hiding. Or being hidden, Wolfe corrected. Kramer waved at the body. But he's dead now, so what's your point? Wolfe's eyes narrowed at the stopped clock. My point is that if their proofs are real, and they are, then the assumption about the time of death is wrong. Kramer snorted. What, the clock lied? Wolfe's tone hardened. The clock is not a witness, it is a prop. He looked at me. Goodwin, that wall clock, remove it. The uniformed cop started to object, then looked at Kramer, then shut up. I lifted the clock off its nail carefully. It was light, cheap plastic. On the back was a small battery compartment. The compartment was empty. I held it up. No battery. Wolfe nodded once. So it did not stop at 2:17. It was set to 2:17. Kramer's face darkened. Why? Wolfe's eyes were cold. Because someone wishes you to believe a time, and when someone wants you to believe a time, it is because time is the hinge of the crime. The medical examiner cleared his throat. If he was poisoned, then the time of death becomes difficult, Wolfe said, which is convenient for the killer. Kramer's jaw worked. Or the killer is trying to frame somebody who has an alibi at 2:17. Wolfe's gaze flicked to him. At last, Inspector, a useful thought. Kramer bristled, then growled. Who has an alibi at 2:17? Wolfe's voice was calm. We will discover that. It is the purpose of the number. I looked at Heller's face. He still looked too neat. Even death hadn't messed him up much, and that meant someone had been careful. The kind of careful you use when you're writing a story you want the reader to swallow. Whole, Kramer muttered. This blows the whole missing person thing. It does, Wolfe said, and that is precisely why it was done. The body ruins the story only if you believe the story was about vanishing. It was not. He turned his eyes on me. Mr. Goodwin, what time was the Port Authority delivery scheduled? 12:10, I said. Wolfe nodded. And now, at 2:17, an arbitrary time, Mr. Heller is presented dead. That is not coincidence. It is control. Kramer scowled. Control of what? Wolfe's voice dropped. Control of us. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the draft from the stairwell. If Wolfe was right, and he usually was, then Grant Heller hadn't simply disappeared, and he hadn't simply been killed. He had been used as a clock hand to point us where someone wanted us to look. Wolfe glanced once more around the spotless room, then said, Inspector, you will secure this room thoroughly. No one enters without record. No one removes anything without noting it. Kramer grunted. Yeah. Wolfe looked at me. Goodwin, we return home. There is work to do, and it cannot be done standing over a corpse arranged like a Christmas hamper. We went down the stairs, leaving Kramer barking orders at his men, and as we stepped out into the raw March air, Wolfe said quietly, almost to himself, They have provided us with proofs, therefore we must distrust the conclusion those proofs suggest. I glanced at him, meaning. Wolfe's eyes were steady. Meaning, Archie, that Grant, Heller's death did not occur where you see it, or when they want you to believe it did, and if Wolfe was right, then somewhere in New York a clock was still running, and someone else was holding the key. Chapter 4, The Watch That Wouldn't Lie. The medical report offers a wide window that conveniently hugs the gossip already spreading downtown. Wolfe dismisses gossip and interrogates objects. Hella's wristwatch, set 6 minutes fast, still running. A hotel clerk remembers Hella clearly, and then admits the man never spoke a word. Wolfe suggests the sightings were built to be honest errors, not deliberate lies. If everyone is truthful, then the deception was engineered to use truth as its camouflage. The medical examiner's report arrived the next afternoon, with all the warmth of a tax notice. Kramer sent a copy over because Wolfe had made it awkward not to, and because Kramer secretly enjoys having Wolfe solve things he can then claim he nearly solved himself. I read it aloud in Wolfe's office while Wolfe sat in his chair, like a monument to patience. "Cause of death," I said. "Probable asphyxiation, no external marks, consistent with suffocation, using a soft object. Time of death, indeterminate within a broad range, 12 to 24 hours prior to discovery, affected by ambient heat." Kramer's broad range was the kind of range that would let half of Manhattan stroll through it without an alibi. Wolfe made a sound of contempt. "Convenient." "Convenient for who?" I asked. "For anyone who wishes to hide behind rumor," Wolfe replied, "and rumor is already walking." He nodded toward the newspaper on the side table. Lon Cohen had not printed names. Lon knew better. But the item was there. Prominent attorney found dead in uptown room. Speculation was the seasoning. "Everybody downtown thinks he died right after he vanished," I said. "That fits the public appetite." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Public appetite is irrelevant. Facts are not," he gestured. "Give me the evidence property list." I handed it over. I had copied it from Kramer's file with the ease of long practice and the mild guilt of a man who pretends not to enjoy it. Wolfe read, then pointed. "His wristwatch." "It was on him," I said. "Still on his wrist." "Retrieve it," Wolfe said. I sighed. "Sure. I'll ask Kramer nicely, and he'll hand it over with a bow." Wolfe's gaze cut to me. "You will use whatever method is effective." That meant I should stop complaining and start operating. 2 hours later, I was in the Homicide Bureau, trading banter for access. Kramer growled. But he signed the release because Wolfe had already cornered him in the only vulnerable place he possesses, his desire to solve a case. Back at the brownstone, I set the wristwatch on Wolfe's desk. It was a good one. Gold case, leather band, understated and expensive. It had stopped when they removed it, but I had not wound it. Wolfe picked it up delicately, like an orchid. He turned it, studied the face. Then the back his thick fingers moved with surprising precision. "Observe," he said. He held it out to me. The second hand began to tick. "You wound it," I said. "No," Wolfe replied. "I merely released it. The stem was pulled to the setting position. It was not running because it was being held. The mechanism is sound." I leaned closer. The hands moved steadily now, sure and indifferent to our theories. Wolfe checked the time against the office clock, then against his own pocket watch, then nodded slightly. "It is 6 minutes fast," he said. "So Hella liked being early," I offered. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Or someone wanted him early?" I stared. "You think the killer set it?" Wolfe's voice was calm. "I think the watch is the only honest clock in the affair." He lifted it again. "A wall clock with no battery is a prop. A watch that continues to run after the corpse is discovered is not a prop unless someone has taken extraordinary care to make it one." "Extraordinary care," I said, "like staging a briefcase at Port Authority." Wolfe nodded. "Yes, like renting a spotless room over a closed pharmacy, like arranging sightings with witnesses who can prove they were present." He set the watch down and looked at me. "Now the hotel." I blinked. "Hotel?" Wolfe's eyes were steady. Mrs. Braddock's office building, Mr. Neil Heller's coffee shop. Those are public sightings. But a man who is being moved must pass through private thresholds, lobbies, desks, clerks, find the one who saw him, and will remember without embellishment. That was Wolfe at his most maddening. He ignored a room full of shouting to listen to a doorknob. I went. The building where Grant Heller had been found dead had once been a pharmacy, which meant upstairs rooms rented cheap to men who didn't want their names remembered. But the room itself had been rented under a false name through a small hotel office 2 blocks away. A residences place that handled keys for the whole shabby strip. The clerk at the desk was a thin man with the patient exhaustion of someone who has seen every category of human failing and learned to charge by the week. I showed him Heller's photograph. His eyes focused. "Yeah," he said. "I saw that guy." "When?" I asked. "2 days ago," he said. "Came in afternoon. Didn't talk much." "Didn't talk much," I echoed. The clerk hesitated. "Didn't talk at all." That stopped me. He didn't speak. The clerk shook his head. Number just looked at me, gave me cash, put a finger on the key I handed him like he didn't want to touch it. I asked for a name, he wrote it. "Did it look like him?" I asked. The clerk's lips tightened. "Looked exactly like him. That's why I remember. He had that lawyer face, like he was judging you." "And he never spoke," I said again. "No," the clerk repeated. "Not a word, like he was afraid his voice would ruin it." "Back at the brownstone," I reported. Wolfe listened without moving, then said, "Excellent." "Excellent," I said. "A dead man who didn't speak is excellent." "It is excellent," Wolfe replied, "because it reveals design." He tapped the watch lightly. A man vanishes. A briefcase is staged. A phone line is cancelled. Sightings occur with witnesses who are truthful. A clerk recalls the man's face, but admits he never spoke. "That is not random behavior," I said. "It's a puppet show." Wolfe nodded. "Yes, and you have been watching the puppet and forgetting the hand." I frowned. "You think the sightings were deliberate, but the witnesses weren't lying." "Precisely," Wolfe said. "They were designed to be honest mistakes, not lies." He leaned back slightly. "If I wished to create confusion, I would not instruct a person to commit perjury. People are unreliable. Instead, I would present them with a truth that is misleading, an accurate face in the wrong place, at the wrong time." I felt the pieces shift. So someone who looks like Heller. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Or someone made to look like him. "A double," I said. "Or a corpse moved and displayed." Wolfe corrected, "Before death." I stared at him. "You mean Heller could have been alive, but silent force used to make people remember seeing him?" Wolfe's voice was calm. "Yes, and his running watch, set 6 minutes fast, suggests the man was being moved according to a schedule, not living by his own." I thought about the ransom note, 12:10. I thought about the wall clock set to 2:17. I thought about the watch fast by 6 minutes. 6 minutes, I murmured, like a built-in offset. Wolfe's eyes sharpened, exactly a cushion, enough to control arrivals without appearing exacting. "So," I said slowly, "the popular rumor says he died right after he vanished. The medical reports window lets that rumor live. The staged clock points to a fake time. The watch points to a controlled schedule." Wolfe nodded once. "And the clerk's truth, that the man never spoke, indicates coercion or impersonation. Either way, the deception is engineered to use truth as camouflage." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the same chill I'd felt in that spotless room over the dead pharmacy. "If everybody is truthful," I said, "then somebody built a lie that doesn't require lying." Wolfe's gaze held mine. "Now you are thinking." The doorbell rang. Fritz entered, face composed but eyes alert. "Archie, there is a man. He says he is Neil Heller." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "The brother has arrived." I stood. "On schedule." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "We shall see whether his watch is also 6 minutes fast." Chapter 5. The disappearance plan confirmed. Neil Heller arrives with grief that looks genuine and anger that looks rehearsed. An uneasy duet. Wolfe tests him, then ignores him long enough to let objects speak: papers, keys, and a bank name. A prepaid safe. Deposit box yields duplicate keys, cash bundles, and a typed itinerary ending in one command: do not contact anyone. That means Grant Heller meant to vanish for real. His death was not the reason for the vanishing, so the timeline everyone accepts is the wrong one. And the real schedule is still running somewhere. Neil Heller came into Wolfe's office as if he had practiced the walk in a mirror and still hadn't decided whether to look guilty or injured. He was a few years younger than Grant, built heavier, dressed louder, with the kind of face that says he has been told no and has not yet accepted it as a permanent condition. He stopped on the threshold, took in Wolfe behind the desk, took in me by the chair, and then let his eyes settle on Wolfe with the forced steadiness of a man trying to hold a temper on a leash. "So you're Nero Wolfe," he said. Wolfe's eyelids lowered. "I am." Neil didn't sit. "My brother is dead, so I am informed." Wolfe replied, as if Neil had announced that rain was wet. Neil's jaw tightened. "He wasn't dead when I saw him," I said. "That depends on whether you're counting by calendar or by rumor." Neil's head snapped toward me. "You Archie Goodwin." "That's my burden," I said. "Sit down, Mr. Heller. Standing like that makes you look like you want to punch the furniture." Neil glanced at Wolfe, realized the furniture probably couldn't be punched without consequences, and sat hard on the red leather chair. It was the wrong chair for him. "Wolfe dislikes wrong chairs almost as much as wrong facts," Wolfe said. "You claim you saw your brother 2 days after his disappearance." Neil's lips pressed together. "I didn't claim it. I did it." Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "Where?" "Coffee shop in Astoria," Neil said. 6 o'clock. He was there because he told me to be there. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "He told you?" Neil hesitated a fraction. "A note, left under my door. Told me the place and time. Told me to come alone." "Did you bring the note?" Wolfe asked. Neil's eyes flicked down. Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Convenient." Neil's posture stiffened. "What do you want from me?" "Truth," Wolfe said. "It is not as common as you may think." He didn't talk much, but he kept looking at the door, like someone might come in. I said, "Did he talk at all?" Neil's mouth moved, then closed. "Not much." "That's not an answer," I said. Neil's face reddened. "He said 2 things. He said, 'Neil, I'm sorry,' and he said, 'Don't let her touch it.'" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Her," Neil swallowed. "Celeste," that landed like a brick. Wolfe looked at me. I looked back. Celeste Heller had arrived with fear and precision. Now her husband's brother was delivering a warning that pointed at her hands. Wolfe said, "What is it?" Neil's jaw worked. "I don't know. That's the problem. Grant always had something, a file, a plan, a trick. He always thought he was the smartest man in the room. Was he?" Wolfe asked mildly. Neil's eyes flicked up, irritated. "He thought so." Wolfe's gaze held him. "You were estranged, yet he summoned you and apologized." "Why?" Neil's voice came harsh. "Because he needed me." Wolfe nodded. "Yes, and why did he need you?" Neil's shoulders sagged a fraction, and for the first time he looked less rehearsed and more tired. "Because I knew where he hid things," he said quietly. "When we were kids, we hid things all the time. He never stopped." Wolfe leaned forward slightly. "Where?" Neil stared at Wolfe, then shook his head. "I'm not giving you anything you can twist." Wolfe's expression did not change. "Then you are useless." Neil stiffened. "You fat." Wolfe's voice snapped, sharp enough to stop him mid-insult. "Control yourself, sir. Your brother is dead, and you are here because you want someone else to be responsible. If you wish my help, you will behave like a civilized man." Neil's fists unclenched slowly. His breathing steadied. He nodded once, grudging. "All right," he said. "There was a bank, a safe deposit box. Grant opened it years ago. He made me go with him once. Said if he ever got hit by a bus, I'd know which box was his." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Name of the bank." Neil gave it. "Hudson Fidelity, and a branch location." I felt a small chill because a bank box is where you put things you want to survive you. Wolfe said, "Do you have the key?" Neil shook his head. "Number, he kept it." Wolfe's gaze stayed steady. "Then how is this information useful?" Neil's mouth tightened. "Because he didn't trust Celeste. He didn't trust Rist. He trusted me just enough to point at the hiding place." Wolfe leaned back, absorbing it. Then he said, "Goodwin, call Inspector Kramer." Kramer answered in a mood, which is his default setting. "What?" he barked. "Inspector," Wolfe said evenly. "We require access to a safe deposit box at Hudson Fidelity, Grant Heller's." Kramer snorted. "You don't require. You request, and I'll need a warrant. If you prefer not to, I will inform the district attorney that your department is delaying TF." "All right," Kramer snapped. "All right, I'll get it." Wolfe hung up and looked at Neil. "You will accompany Mr. Goodwin to the bank." Neil bristled. "Why?" "Because," Wolfe said, "if you are lying, your presence will be instructive. If you are truthful, your presence will be useful. Either way, you will come." 2 hours later, we were in a Hudson Fidelity office that smelled like polished stone and quiet power. Kramer arrived with paperwork, scowling as if each signature had bruised his ego. A bank officer with a smooth face, and no imagination led us to the vault. The box was opened under record, and what came out was not dramatic. No jewels, no murder weapon. Just the kind of items that become dramatic later, when you realize what they mean. Inside were 2 duplicate keys on a ring, one labeled Storage B, -14, and the other unlabeled. There were bundles of cash, neat and rubber. Banded enough to buy a new life, if you didn't mind the smell of it. And there was a typed itinerary, folded twice, precise as a legal brief. Just that command, like a final instruction to himself. I looked at Neil. His face had gone pale. "He meant it," he whispered. I said, "Yeah." He wasn't improvising. This was a plan. Back in Wolfe's office, Wolfe read the itinerary without blinking. Then he looked up, eyes cold with satisfaction that had nothing to do with pleasure. "The disappearance plan was real," Wolfe said. I nodded. "Prepaid, packaged and labeled." Neil spoke hoarsely. "So he was going to leave. He was going to go." "Yes," Wolfe replied. "Which means his death was not the reason for his vanishing," I said. "He intended to be gone, and then somebody killed him anyway." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Not somebody. Someone who needed the plan to exist. Someone who needed you to believe he left voluntarily, until they needed you to believe he was dead." Kramer, who had come back with us and was now looming by the door, growled, "So what's the play, Wolfe?" Wolfe's voice was flat. "The core riddle is now clear. If the plan was genuine, then the death had to occur off the assumed timeline." He tapped the itinerary once with a finger. Grant Heller was moving according to a schedule. Whoever killed him either hijacked that schedule or replaced him inside it. I felt my stomach tighten again, the way it had in that spotless room. Wolfe looked at me. "Mr. Goodwin, retrieve the key label's meaning, Storage B -14, and do it promptly." I reached for my coat, because if we're late. Wolfe's eyes held mine. "Then we will remain where we are, exactly as the note promised." And as I headed for the door, I realized something else. A man who types "do not contact anyone" is either protecting someone or being managed by someone who doesn't want him to. Chapter 6. The partner who kept the office warm, Dean Kroll, the firm's operations partner, produces records that place Grant Heller at his desk after the disappearance date. Everything is tidy: call logs, dictation slips, messenger receipts, and all of it is true in the most useless way. Wolfe points out the trick. The papers prove activity, not presence, and activity can be manufactured. I find a rubber stamp of Heller's signature and fresh ink pads in Kroll's desk, tools for an honest-looking lie. Kroll admits the paperwork is his doing and counts on everyone drawing the wrong conclusion from it. Wolfe sent me back to the office with instructions that were short, precise, and irritating. "Goodwin," he said, I wish to know who kept Grant Heller's professional life breathing after he vanished. That's poetic, I told him. Also disgusting. Wolfe ignored me. The escrow file contains a storage key. The safe deposit box contains cash and itinerary. Those indicate a plan. Now we must determine who benefited from the plan appearing to continue. Meaning, I said, who wanted it to look like Heller was still working while he was busy being missing or busy being dead. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Exactly. So I went back to Midtown and into the suite where ambition is carpeted, and everyone speaks in controlled tones as if volume is taxable. Douglas Rist met me at the door with the strained patience of a man whose entire day had been converted into crises. You again, he said. Try gratitude, I suggested. It builds character. Rice didn't bite. He led me past the reception desk into a conference room where a man was waiting with 3 binders stacked like a defensive wall. The man was in his late 30s, thin hair too neat, suit too careful. His smile was courteous in the way a lock is courteous. It doesn't insult you, it just refuses. Archie Goodwin, he said. Dean Kroll. Kroll, I said. Partner, operations partner. He replied smoothly. Managing compliance. Records, the unglamorous parts that keep the place from catching fire. Rice said. Dean's been handling everything since Grant. Since this started. Kroll nodded, as if accepting a compliment for excellent housekeeping during a flood. We're cooperating fully, Kroll said. Truthfully, Mr. Goodwin, we want this resolved, the firm's reputation. Needs CPR, I finished. Yes, show me what you're proud of. Kroll opened the top binder with a deliberate motion. Office records, he said. Telephone logs, dictation slips, messenger receipts. Time-stamped entries from our internal document system. He slid pages toward me, one by one, like a man dealing cards. He already knew would win. The papers were tidy and convincing. On the day Grant Heller supposedly vanished, there were entries logged under his name, a call placed to a client at 9:12, a dictation request at 10:30, a memo printed at 11:05. 2 days later, after the wife had reported him missing, after the briefcase had shown up at Port Authority, there were more. A letter filed, a deed copy requested, a notation that read, Heller reviewed, Kroll said calmly. These records place Grant at work after his disappearance. I looked up. Do they? Rice leaned forward, eager. They do. That's what I've been trying to tell the police. Everyone's acting like he was gone, but the office kept receiving instructions. Kroll nodded once, precisely, which suggests that he wasn't gone. Rice finished. Kroll's smile didn't change. Or that someone was acting under his authority. There, just a hairline crack of caution. I paged through more. Everything was consistent. Too consistent. Real life has coffee stains and missing commas. This had none. Who enters these logs? I asked. Kroll answered without pause. Staff, under supervision, secretaries log calls, messengers log deliveries, our system logs document access by user. And Grant's user was accessed, I said. Yes, Kroll said, from his computer, Rice added. His office was locked. But someone could have a key, I said. Rice's mouth tightened. Kroll said, There's no indication of intrusion. I nodded slowly. No indication isn't the same as no intrusion. Kroll's eyes stayed polite. What are you implying? I'm implying, I said, that paper can tell the truth and still lie to you. Rice bristled. That's nonsense. It's law, I said. You boys invented it. Kroll's smile thinned slightly. Mr. Goodwin, these records are accurate. I believe you, I said, and he blinked at that. The question isn't whether they're accurate. The question is what they prove. I closed the binder. They prove the office was active. They don't prove Grant Heller was. Rice opened his mouth to argue. Kroll raised a hand gently, calm control, and Rice stopped. Annoyed that he obeyed, Kroll said, Then what would convince you? Let me see Heller's office, I said, and while we're at it, let me see yours. Rice snapped. His. Why? Because he's the man with the binders, I said, and binders don't assemble themselves. Kroll didn't hesitate. Of course, he said, as if a stranger rummaging his private space were as normal as coffee. That made me suspicious. Men who have nothing to hide usually have something to protect. Grant Heller's office was immaculate. Desk arranged, pen set square. No personal photos except a framed diploma that looked like it had been hung by a ruler. The chair was pushed in. The computer was off. I opened drawers. Nothing interesting. I checked the wastebasket. New bag, no trash. Again from there we went to Kroll's office. It was smaller but warmer, with a plant on the windowsill and a bulletin board of schedules. Kroll sat behind his desk with his hands folded, watching me as if I were a scheduled audit. I opened a drawer on the left side. Pens, paper clips, a stapler. I opened the right. My fingers touched something rubbery and dense. I pulled it out. A rubber stamp, not a generic stamp, an exact reproduction of Grant Heller's signature, carved neatly in black rubber, mounted on a wooden block. Beside it were 2 ink pads, both fresh, one black and one blue, their surfaces shiny with recent use. I held the stamp up. That's cute. Reist's face went white. Dean. What the hell? Kroll's expression didn't change. It is a stamp, he said evenly. I can read, I told him. I'm asking why you own your missing partner's signature. Kroll nodded once, as if I had finally asked the correct question. Because the firm had deadlines, he said. Because clients needed responses. Because court filings do not pause out of respect for drama. Reist sputtered. You forged Grant's signature. Kroll's voice stayed calm. I used an authorized instrument to execute routine documents. Authorized by who? I asked. Kroll looked at me as if the answer were obvious. By Grant, Reist snapped. Grant never. Kroll turned his eyes to Reist, and the temperature in the room shifted. Grant did, Kroll said quietly. 2 months ago, after the Braddock dispute began, he told me, if anything happens, keep the office warm. Keep it moving. No panic, I said. Did he say, use my stamp? Kroll's gaze returned to me. He gave it to me with instructions. And you're telling the truth, I said. Kroll's eyes narrowed a fraction. Yes, I believed him, which made it worse. Because a truth used at the right angle becomes a weapon. I flipped the stamp in my hand. The wood block had a small notch, like it had been dropped and filed. On the underside, in faint pencil, were 2 words, Harbor Light. I kept my face steady inside. Something tightened. Reist saw my eyes drop and followed them. What's that? Kroll's gaze flicked, fast, then returned to calm. A note, he said. Probably Grant's. He labeled his tools. He labeled his forgery kit, I said. Kroll's jaw firmed. He labeled a contingency. I leaned forward. Dean, you kept the office warm by stamping his signature on paperwork after he vanished. That let everyone assume he was still active. That's the wrong conclusion, and you knew it. The public wanted a scandal. I provided what was necessary to prevent collapse. And while everyone drew the wrong conclusion, I said, you stayed clean. Reist's face reddened. You're accusing him of... I'm observing, I corrected. Accusations are Wolfe's hobby. Kroll's eyes stayed on mine. Mr. Goodwin, do you think I killed Grant? I think, I said. You arranged for his absence to look manageable. Kroll's smile returned faint. That is not a crime. Depends what you managed, I said. He didn't answer that. I left with the image of that stamp in my head and the faint pencil words under it. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened while I reported every detail. The records, the neatness, the stamp, the fresh ink pads, the pencil label. Wolfe's eyes were half-lidded, thoughtful. When I finished, he said, Mr. Kroll has told the truth. That's what worries me, I said. Wolfe nodded. Yes, he told the truth about the paperwork, while letting everyone draw the wrong conclusion from it. He lifted a finger. He did not create the plan, Archie. He maintained the illusion of normalcy. That makes him either a useful idiot or a disciplined accessory. Which one? I asked. Wolfe's mouth tightened. We will learn when we pull the knot. He reached for the telephone. Summon Mr. Kroll and Mr. Wrist here tomorrow morning, and inform Inspector Kramer to attend. There will be an office gathering. My stomach gave a small, familiar drop. When Wolfe wants an office gathering, I said. Somebody's about to lose their schedule. Wolfe's eyes met mine. Yes, Archie. Then he added softly, and tonight, you will place that stamp back where you found it. I blinked. Why? Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Because if Mr. Kroll realizes we noticed the label Harbor Light, he will attempt to tidy it, perhaps by removing the tool, perhaps by removing himself. He leaned back. And I prefer my suspects present. I got my coat again, because that's what my life amounts to when Wolfe gets interested, walking into other people's rooms, to help Wolfe sit still. As I reached the front door, Saul Panzer's voice came from the hall. He had arrived without announcement, as he does. Archie, Saul said quietly. Summoners watching the house. I paused with my hand on the knob. Who? Saul's eyes were flat. I don't know, but they're keeping time. Chapter 7. The Wife's Truth with Edges. Page Celeste Heller admits the marriage had cracks, and Grant spoke of leaving for a while with the calm of a man packing a plan. She produces a voicemail dated 2 days after the disappearance. His voice steady, his words oddly careful, almost coded. Wolfe requests carrier records and finds the call didn't come straight from Grant at all. It was routed through a forwarding service, a real message delivered on a dishonest clock, another truthful artifact, arranged to make honest people swear to the wrong time. Saul Panzer doesn't say summoners watching the house, the way a man says, it's raining. He says it, the way a man says, there's a gun on the table. I stopped with my hand on the knob. Front or back? Across the street, Saul said. Parked car, engine off. 2 men, they're not tourists. Maybe they like the architecture, I suggested. Saul's eyes stayed flat. They're keeping time. That was Wolfe's phrase too, which made it feel less like a coincidence and more like a theme. I didn't go out. I went back into the office and told Wolfe. Wolfe didn't look surprised. He looked offended, as if the city had sent an unsolicited advertisement and he was deciding whether to complain. Let them watch, he said. Observation is not action. It can become action, I said. Wolfe's eyelids lowered. Mr. Panzer will prevent inconvenience. Saul nodded once, which was his idea of reassurance. Wolfe turned to me. You will not return the stamp tonight. I blinked. You just told me. I have changed my mind, Wolfe said. If they are watching, then movement will be noticed. We will not provide them with a clock to read. That was sensible, which is always alarming from Wolfe, because it means he's saving up his impracticality for later. The next morning, Fritz announced Mrs. Heller, and the woman who had introduced herself as Celeste arrived again. Same expensive coat, same controlled posture, but with a new tension under the skin, as if sleep had become an enemy. She sat without being told this time. Her eyes went to Wolfe, then to me, and then, briefly, to Saul, who was standing where he could see the front door, and the street without seeming to watch either. Wolfe said, Mrs. Heller. She corrected him, voice tight. Page, Wolfe's brows rose a fraction. Yesterday, you said, Celeste. She held his gaze. My name is Page Celeste Heller. I use Celeste socially, Page when I'm being honest. I said, then this is a good day for Page. Her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. It's a bad day for everything. Wolfe's tone remained even. You have information. Page drew a breath and the control cracked just enough to show anger underneath. We fought, she said. The night before he vanished, we fought hard. Wolfe did not react. About what? About his secrecy, she said. About the Braddock dispute, about the calls he took in the study, about the way he looked at our front window like the street had teeth. She swallowed. And about leaving. My eyebrows went up. He told you he wanted to leave. Yes, she said. Not forever, he said. Her voice tightened with resentment and fear mixed together. He said he might have to go away for a while, to let something cool off. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Did he say where? Number, he said. The less I knew, the safer I was. I murmured. Men say that right before they make you unsafe. Page's eyes flashed at me. He wasn't cruel. He was frightened, Wolfe said. Continue. She reached into her bag and produced her phone as if it were evidence in court. Her fingers trembled once before she steadied them. 2 days after he vanished, she said, I received a voicemail from him. I felt my spine tighten. From Grant. She nodded. His voice, no question, calm, almost, rehearsed. Wolfe's gaze stayed fixed on her phone. Play it, Page tapped. The small speaker filled the office with Grant Heller's voice, low, controlled, familiar from recordings on the firm's website, but stripped of legal confidence and replaced with something careful. Page, the voice said. Listen, do what we discussed. No calls, no visits, no kindness. Keep the house as it is. Don't touch my papers. Don't speak to anyone about Harbor Light. If you must speak, speak to Mr. Wolfe. I will contact you when the weather changes. The message ended with a click. For a moment the room was too quiet. Wolfe's eyes had not blinked. Saul's face hadn't moved at all. I was the only one who looked like a man who had just heard a ghost use his first name. Page's voice shook. It's him. It has to be. Wolfe's voice was calm. It is him. She gripped the phone harder. Then he was alive 2 days after he vanished. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Or someone wished you to believe that. Her chin lifted. Are you calling me a liar? No, Wolfe said. I am calling you a witness. She swallowed. The voicemail is dated. The phone shows it. Wolfe nodded once. Yes, and phone displays are as honest as wall clocks without batteries. Page stared. What are you saying? I am saying, Wolfe replied, that the message is real, but the timing may not be. She stiffened. How could that be? Wolfe turned his eyes to me. Goodwin, telephone the carrier. Request call detail records for Mrs. Heller's number for that date and time. You will use Mr. Kramer's cooperation if necessary, I said. I'll use whatever persuades best. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. Use persuasion, not vandalism. 2 hours and 1 irritated phone call later, helped along by Kramer's grudging authorization and a technician who liked paperwork more than people. I brought Wolfe what he wanted. The carrier logs, printed and stamped, the kind of thing juries love. Wolfe read them once. Then he handed them to me. I scanned. Incoming voicemail deposit, I said. Origin. I paused. It's not a normal number. Wolfe's voice was flat. It is a forwarding service, a message relay. The call did not come directly from Grant Heller's phone. It was routed. Page's face went pale, but the voice. The voice is his, Wolfe said. The route is not. Someone recorded him, or used a prior recording, and delivered it to you on a chosen schedule. Page's eyes filled, but her voice came out hard. So he's dead when he leaves me that message. Wolfe did not soften the truth. Possibly, or alive, and coerced when it was recorded. In either case, the timing displayed to you was intended to mislead. Page's hands tightened on her phone. Why would anyone do that? Wolfe's eyes held hers. Because you are credible, because your grief would be genuine, because you would repeat the date and time with certainty, and others would accept it. She stared at him, wounded. So my truth is being used. Wolfe nodded. Yes, you have been provided with an honest artifact arranged to support a false timeline. I said. Same trick as the office records, same trick as the sightings. Truth on paper, wrong conclusion in the head. Page's breath hitched. Harbor Light, she whispered. He said it in the voicemail. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Indeed. That is the only part of the message that matters. It is a hook. Page looked up, anger returning to shore up fear. A hook for what? Wolfe leaned back. For whomever is watching you, for whomever wishes to learn whether you will touch the papers, whether you will panic, whether you will contact Mr. Wrist or Mr. Kroll, or me. Paige's eyes flicked to Saul, then to the window. As if she could suddenly feel the street staring, she said quietly, "They're watching my house too." Saul's voice came in soft. "Likely," Paige swallowed. "Then what do I do?" Wolfe's tone was crisp. "You will do nothing new. You will behave exactly as you have behaved. You will return home. You will not contact Mr. Wrist. You will not contact Mr. Kroll. If anyone contacts you, you will report it to me at once." Paige stood. Her posture was still controlled, but her eyes were no longer pretending. At the door she turned back. "Mr. Wolfe," Grant said, "when the weather changes." "What does that mean?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "It is code, a scheduled signal, and now that I have heard it, I will determine what change he meant." Paige left, and when the door closed, Wolfe sat very still, fingers steepled. "I said, so the voicemail is real, but the clock is fake." Wolfe's voice was quiet. "Yes, and whoever made it wanted Paige to swear he was alive on that date." Wolfe nodded. "To keep the disappearance plan credible, long enough to serve its purpose." I felt the familiar drop in my stomach. "Which is?" Wolfe's eyes met mine. "To move something, money, documents or guilt, through time without interference." Saul's gaze went to the front window. "The car across the street moved," he said. Wolfe did not look out. "Let it." I rubbed my forehead. "Wolfe, everybody's telling the truth and it keeps turning into lies." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Then we must stop listening to people and start listening to the schedule." He reached for his notebook. "Tomorrow, we will tie the timeline to a place. When a man vanishes with an itinerary, he must have intended to arrive somewhere." He looked at me, and if he did not arrive, Archie, someone else did. Chapter 8. The pharmacy room and the stopped clock. I go back to the rented room over the shuttered pharmacy and find the dead clock was never dead, just unplugged with care. A receipt tucked under the mattress shows the room was paid for earlier than the police timeline allows. Wolfe traces the room to a quiet rental racket run through the pharmacy owner, who owes Dean Kroll a favor. And the stopped clock was the loudest prop because everyone wanted to believe it. If you ever want to feel how flimsy a murder can be, go back to the scene after the shouting has moved on. You discover the little truths. Nobody bothered to hear the first time because a corpse is such a loud distraction. Kramer did not like me going back to the pharmacy room. Kramer doesn't like me doing anything that might produce facts before he has time to make a speech about them. Wolfe handled him with 3 sentences on the telephone. Calm, heavy, and final. And I got my access. The building looked more miserable in daylight. The pharmacy sign sagged like a tired jaw, and the windows were still covered. Upstairs, the hallway smelled of cheap disinfectant, which is what you use when you want a place to appear clean without doing the honest work. A uniformed man unlocked the door for me and watched, as if I might steal the wallpaper. I didn't blame him. The wallpaper looked as though it had been stolen first. Inside, the room was the same. Narrow bed, small table, sink, chair, and the wall where the clock had hung. The nail was still there. The stain around it was too, an outline that proved the clock had been a regular resident long before it became famous. I started where Wolfe always starts, with what people didn't question. The outlet the clock had been described as stopped at 2:17, as if it had halted in terror at the moment of violence. It wasn't a battery clock. It had a cord. I had noticed the cord the first time and then allowed the general hysteria to push it aside. Now I crouched by the baseboard and examined the plug. It wasn't fully seated. It was half out. Just enough to cut power, not enough to look dramatic. The prong showed fresh scrape marks, bright where someone had wiggled it loose. Not yanked, loosened, deliberate, careful like a man turning down the flame under a pot. I straightened and looked around the room again. A stage. The bed looked too smooth, so I stripped the blanket back and checked the mattress seams. People hide things under mattresses because people have learned their hiding places from old movies. Under the corner, between mattress and frame, was a folded slip of paper, thin and stiff, a receipt. It was from the residence's desk 2 blocks away, the same desk clerk who remembered a man who never spoke. The receipt was dated 3 days earlier than Kramer's assumed rental date, and it recorded payment for the room for a full week paid in cash. That mattered. A week paid up front meant the room was secured and waiting. It hadn't been grabbed in a hurry by a desperate killer. It had been prepared. I pocketed the receipt and went back downstairs to the closed pharmacy. There was a side door with a bell and a faded sign about prescriptions. The bell didn't ring when I pushed. It was dead, like everything else. A man appeared from a back room anyway. Short, thick, grey hair, eyes that had learned suspicion the way lungs learn smoke. He looked like a pharmacist who had stopped filling prescriptions and started filling other needs. "What do you want?" he asked. "Information," I said. "It's cheaper than trouble," he snorted. "No trouble here. Place is closed." "Closed is a state of mind," I told him. "Your upstairs rooms aren't closed. They're rented." His eyes tightened. "Not by me, sure," I said. "By the building, by the wind, by Christmas spirits, pick one." He stared at me, then glanced toward the street as if checking who might be watching. "Who are you?" "Archie Goodwin," I said. "Nero Wolfe's man." That name did it. His shoulders dropped a fraction, not relief. Recognition. Recognition is never friendly. "I don't know anything," he said quickly. "That's fine," I said. "Then you won't mind telling me who collects the cash for the upstairs rooms?" He hesitated. "Just enough." "You," I said. His jaw worked. "It's temporary rentals. People need a place." "People who don't want names," I agreed. "Who introduced you to the idea?" He stiffened. "Nobody." I let my voice turn mild. "Dean Kroll." His eyes flicked, and that was all I needed. A flicker is a confession when it's the right flicker. "I don't know him," he said. "Too fast." "You owe him," I corrected. "He did you a favor. Licenses, inspections, paperwork. Something that keeps a closed pharmacy from being a demolished pharmacy." The man's mouth tightened. "I pay my taxes." "I'm sure you do," I said. "And I'm sure Kroll helped you keep the city from noticing you weren't paying something else." He swallowed. "I just rent rooms. To men who don't speak," I said. "And you loosen plugs when asked." His eyes widened. "I didn't." "Don't waste the word didn't on me," I told him. "I'm not a jury." He stared at the floor. "Kroll asked for a room," he muttered. "Said it was for a client. Said it had to be. Ready, clean, quiet." "Ready when?" I asked. The man licked his lips. "He said before the weekend," he said. "If anyone asks, it was rented yesterday." I nodded. "And the clock?" The man's shoulders rose and fell. He said the clock had to stop. He said people believe clocks. I didn't understand. "Oh, you understood," I said. "You just didn't care." I left him there, shrinking into the dim pharmacy like a man hoping guilt can be dissolved in dust. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened while I laid the receipt, and my notes on his desk. Saul stood by the window, watching the street without moving his head. Fritz served coffee as if a staged murder room were a normal topic with dessert. Wolfe examined the receipt, then the note about the loosened plug. His eyes were half-lidded, pleased in the way he gets when facts stop wriggling. "So," Wolfe said, "the room was paid for earlier than the police assumed." 3 days earlier, I said. "A full week in advance." "And the plug was loosened deliberately," Wolfe said. "Carefully," I confirmed, "not yanked. Like setting a scene." Wolfe nodded once. "The room was a stage. And the clock," I said, "was the loudest prop, because everyone believed it." Wolfe's mouth tightened with contempt. "Yes, because people prefer a simple time to a complex truth." He tapped the receipt lightly. Dean Kroll did not merely keep the office warm, he warmed other things as well. Arrangements, access, cooperation. I frowned. "So Kroll helped stage the room. That doesn't prove he killed Heller." "No," Wolfe said. "But it proves he helped the story appear plausible. And a man who manages plausibility is usually managing guilt, his own or someone else's. I leaned back, feeling the case tighten the way a knot tightens when you pull the right strand. So, I said, we've got a planned disappearance, a staged murder room, honest artifacts with dishonest clocks, and a partner who keeps everything warm. Wolfe's gaze held mine. And now, Archie, we have a favor owed, always a useful chain. Saul spoke quietly from the window. The car across the street is back. Wolfe didn't look up. Good. Let them watch. I rubbed my jaw. Because we're about to do something on schedule. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Yes. He reached for his notebook, and this time, Mr. Goodwin, we will decide what time it is. Chapter 9. The real day of death. Wolfe rebuilds the timeline, the way he repots an orchid. Roots first, then the showy parts grant. Hella vanished by choice. Began his plan, and then met someone privately, on schedule. He was killed within hours, stored cold to widen the medical window, then staged upstairs over the pharmacy. The later proofs were engineered truths, look-alikes, stamped paperwork, and routed calls to fool honest witnesses. So the murderer is the one who profited most from Hella, seeming alive after he was already dead. Wolfe did not celebrate when I put the receipt and the plug story on his desk. Wolfe never celebrates. He files satisfaction away like a dangerous tool and locks it. He sat with his fingers steepled, eyes half-lidded, and said, "Now we may stop wandering in rumor." I said, "I'd like to stop wandering in stairwells too." Wolfe ignored that. "Mr. Goodwin, the first error was assuming that a disappearance must be explained by the moment it is noticed. A man may leave at 8:30 and be dead by noon, while the world spends 3 days watching shadows and calling it investigation." "And the second error?" I asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Believing clocks." He took Hella's wristwatch from the desk drawer and set it beside the pharmacy receipt. "Observe how carefully they have provided you with honesty. A widow hears a real voice. A clerk sees a real face. An office produces real records. All true, each one placed precisely to support the same false conclusion." I leaned forward. "So you've got the real timeline." "I am constructing it," Wolfe corrected. "You will refrain from romantic phrasing." "Yes, sir," I said, and waited, because Wolfe likes an audience when he is about to lay down a track. He began, as always, with what could not be argued. "Grant Hella vanished by choice," Wolfe said. "He instructed his wife not to call until noon. He created a safe deposit box with cash, keys, and an itinerary ending with 'Do not contact anyone.' That is intention, not abduction." "Agreed," I said. "He intended to go. He executed the first steps," Wolfe continued. "He cancelled his private line through security questions. He arranged the briefcase at Port Authority as misdirection. He rented the storage unit, paid in cash, under his name, or a close imitation. He obtained passport photos." I nodded. "And then he met someone." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Yes, privately, not in his office, not with his wife, not with his partner. A meeting that required silence." "The hotel clerk," I said. "The man looked like Hella and didn't speak." Wolfe lifted a finger. "That clerk's testimony does not prove Hella was alive at that time. It proves a man with Hella's face was displayed." I frowned. "Display, like a prop." "Exactly," Wolfe said. "Now consider the body." He tapped the medical report with contempt. The medical window was broad because the conditions were manipulated. The room was warm, yes, but warmth alone does not produce that much uncertainty. The uncertainty was assisted. I felt my stomach tighten. Cold storage. Wolfe nodded once. He was killed within hours of disappearing, not days later. His body was stored cold to blur the window, then presented in a prepared room, paid for in advance, over a shuttered pharmacy. The clock was unplugged and set to an instructive time. The room was scrubbed, the jacket was folded, the scene was composed. I exhaled. So, the real day of death is the same day he vanished. Within hours, Wolfe said. That is why the noon demand at Port Authority was so important. It was never to recover Hella, it was to recover control, I said, and the later sightings. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Designed to be honest mistakes. A look, a like in a lobby, a silent man at a desk, paperwork stamped with an authorized signature, a voicemail routed through forwarding services, real voice, dishonest clock. I stared at him. They didn't need liars. They needed witnesses. Precisely, Wolfe said. And witnesses are most convincing when they are sincere. I leaned back, letting the pieces rearrange themselves with that unpleasant click. You hear in your mind when the simple story dies and the true one takes its place. So if Hella was dead within hours, I said slowly, then someone benefited from him being alive after. Wolfe's eyes held mine. Now you see the shape of the killer. The one who needed the office warm, I said. Wolfe did not answer immediately. He reached for the rubber. Stamp note I had copied, Harbour Light penciled under the block, and set it beside the watch, and receipt as if arranging a modest, murderous still life. Mr. Kroll, Wolfe said at last, voice flat. He did not merely maintain operations, he maintained belief. He allowed Douglas Rist, Paige Heller, Inspector Kramer, and half the city to draw the convenient conclusion that Grant Heller was still functioning after he vanished. By keeping the paperwork moving, I said, even after the man was dead. Wolfe nodded. And by having access to favors, rooms prepared, plugs loosened, receipts hidden, he ensured that the body's eventual appearance would arrive on schedule, not on truth. I rubbed my jaw. That makes him our killer. It makes him obvious, Wolfe corrected, and his eyes sharpened with the irritation he reserves for conclusions that arrive too easily. Obvious is not the same as proved. Then what are we missing? I asked. We are missing, Wolfe said. The moment the plan was hijacked, the meeting Heller intended, his true destination. The identity of the person he trusted enough to vanish and feared enough to be silent. I frowned. Harbour Light. Wolfe nodded. The name of the escrow, the label under the stamp, the phrase placed in the voicemail. It is the hinge, and hinges creak when you put weight on them. He reached for the telephone, I said. Who are you calling? Wolfe's eyes stayed on the dial. Everyone. The word had the pleasant, terrifying finality of a judge setting court. Paige Heller will come, Wolfe said, because she wants her truth returned to her. Douglas Rist will come because he fears scandal more than prison. Dean Kroll will come because he believes he has controlled the schedule. Neil Heller will come because he wants someone to blame. Inspector Kramer will come because he cannot resist the hope of being right. He looked up at me. And you, Mr. Goodwin, will ensure that Mr. Kroll does not leave the city before he hears his own story read aloud. I stood. With Saul's voice came from the doorway, quiet as a latch. Already. Wolfe settled back in his chair as if he were merely planning dinner. Tomorrow morning, he said. In this office, we will have our gathering. I will state the true timeline, and then I will name the man who profited by keeping Grant Heller alive, on paper, after his body was already cold. I headed for the hall, and as I reached the front door I felt the case tighten the way a clock tightens when the spring is fully wound. Because tomorrow, at Wolfe's desk, time was finally going to tell the truth. Chapter 10. The Not Untied Wolf announces the itinerary, contains one last line. A meeting place Grant Heller never reached. Dean Kroll moves before his face can, rushing to intercept what he thinks is still hidden. I tail him neatly, and Kramer catches him mid-bribe, trying to buy the pharmacy owner's silence about the early rental back at the brownstone. Wolfe ends it the only way he ever ends it, with reason, not drama. The plan to vanish was real, so the death had to happen only when the killer needed it to. Wolfe's office was full the next morning in that particular way of his. No crowd, no confusion, just the exact number of people required to make lies uncomfortable. Paige Heller sat rigid in the yellow chair, hands folded as if she were holding herself together by etiquette. Douglas Rist perched at the edge of a chair, like a man ready to flee his own reputation. Neil Heller stood near the fireplace, refusing to sit because anger needs room. Dean Kroll was the calmest of the lot, which was either discipline or a misunderstanding of where he was. Inspector Kramer was there too, glowering, with two plainclothes men in the hall, because Wolfe had insisted on competent restraint. Saul Panzer stood where he could see the front door, and everyone's hands without looking, as if he cared about either. Wolfe looked at them all as if they were items on a bill. "Mr. Kroll," Wolfe began, "you have been diligent." Kroll's smile was slight. "I've done what I could to keep the firm functioning." "You have done more than that," Wolfe replied. "You have kept it warm." Reist bristled. "What is this? If you're accusing Dean—" Wolfe lifted a finger. Wrist stopped. Page's eyes stayed on Wolfe, hungry and afraid. Wolfe said, "Grant Heller planned his disappearance. That is established by the safe deposit box, cash, keys, and a typed itinerary ending with, 'Do not contact anyone.'" Page's face tightened. Neil's mouth twisted as if he wanted to argue with paper. Wolfe continued, "Therefore the disappearance was not caused by his death. The death was an interruption," Kramer muttered. "Get to it." Wolfe's eyes flicked to him. "I am." He picked up a sheet from his desk, Grant Heller's itinerary, and held it lightly. "This itinerary," Wolfe said, "contains a final instruction that I have not yet shared." Kroll's eyes moved, just once, quick to the paper and back. It was the smallest tell in the world, and it was loud as a bell. Wolfe's voice remained calm. "It specifies a meeting location, a private appointment, a place Mr. Heller intended to reach after he secured his cash and keys." Page inhaled sharply. Wrist leaned forward. Neil's anger shifted to confusion. Kroll spoke carefully. "You didn't mention that before." Wolfe nodded. "I did not." Kramer growled. "And where is it?" Wolfe looked at him placidly. "If you are patient, Inspector, you may learn something." Kramer's jaw clenched, but he stayed quiet because his men were watching, and he hates being embarrassed in front of witnesses. Wolfe turned his gaze back to the room. Now, Grant Heller was killed within hours of vanishing. His body was held cold to broaden the medical window, then staged in a prepared room above a closed pharmacy. The wall clock was unplugged and set to an instructive time. The room was paid for days earlier than you assumed. Page's face went white. Neil stared, as if someone had knocked the floor out from under him. Wolfe's tone stayed measured. After Mr. Heller was already dead, sightings were arranged, a man with his face, silent office activity maintained, and a voicemail routed through a forwarding service. All honest artifacts designed to create sincere witnesses. Reist swallowed. The stamp. Wolfe inclined his head. Yes, Mr. Kroll possessed, and used a stamp of Mr. Heller's signature. He told the truth about the paperwork, while allowing everyone to believe the wrong thing. Kroll's hands remained folded, but the knuckles were a shade whiter. "That isn't murder," he said. "No," Wolfe agreed. "It is preparation for the convenience of murder." Neil barked. "So you're saying he killed Grant?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "I am saying that the killer is the one who benefited most from Grant Heller being alive after he was already dead." Kroll's smile tried to return and couldn't find the muscle. "And you'll prove that with a supposed meeting location?" "I will prove it," Wolfe said, "with your behavior." He set the itinerary down. "Mr. Kroll, you are a man of schedules. You have relied on controlling time, phone cancellations, office logs, prepared rooms. When I tell you that the itinerary contains a final meeting location, information that could identify the person Mr. Heller trusted, you will feel compelled to intercept whatever evidence remains at that location." Kroll's eyes hardened. "That's absurd." Wolfe's tone turned mildly bored. "It is inevitable." Kroll stood abruptly. "I've indulged enough of this. I have meetings." Kramer stepped forward instinctively. Wolfe raised a hand. "Let him go," Wolfe said. Kramer sputtered. "Let him, Goodwin." "Already," I said, and slipped out behind him. Tailing a man in Midtown is like tailing a fish in the ocean. If you panic, you lose him. If you relax, You find him eventually, because he still has to swim somewhere. Kroll did not take a cab. He walked fast for 2 blocks, then caught one with the desperation of a man trying to arrive before his own guilt does. I caught another. He headed uptown, then west. When he got out, it was near the closed pharmacy, of course. He didn't go upstairs. He went straight into the pharmacy side door like a man who had done it before. I didn't follow inside. That's how you get hit and call it evidence. I went to the corner payphone. Yes, there are still a few in New York if you know where the city forgot to update itself, and called Kramer. "Inspector," I said, "your man Kroll is at the pharmacy." Kramer swore a word that would have made Fritz drop a tray. "Stay put." I was planning on becoming a lamppost, I told him. I watched through the dusty front glass. Inside, the pharmacy owner, short, thick, guilty, stood behind the counter. Kroll leaned toward him, his posture too intimate for strangers, his hand moving the way men move hands when they are offering peace made of paper. A folded envelope changed owners. The pharmacy man hesitated, then shook his head. Kroll's face tightened. He pulled out more, another envelope, thicker. The man's eyes darted. Kramer's men arrived quietly, which was the first sign of the apocalypse. They came in through the side door. I heard a shout, a scrape, and then Kroll's voice, sharp, angry, surprised. Kramer emerged a moment later, hauling Kroll by the arm, as if dragging a stubborn suitcase. "You were bribing him," Kramer barked, triumphant. "Right in front of my men." Kroll's face was pale now. This is extortion." Kramer laughed. "Yeah, tell it to a judge." The pharmacy owner stood in the doorway, trembling, clutching the envelopes like they might bite. His eyes met mine for a second, and then slid away, ashamed and relieved at the same time. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe received the news with a faint nod, as if Kroll's arrest were merely the expected arrival of a delivery. Kramer brought Kroll into the office, still gripping his arm. Paige rose halfway from her chair. Neil leaned forward. Wrist made a sound like a man watching his career fall downstairs. Kramer shoved Kroll into a chair. "Caught him trying to buy silence about the early rental," he announced. "Cash envelopes. He says it's settling accounts." Wolfe's eyes were calm. "It is settling accounts, his." Kroll's voice was strained. "You set me up," Wolfe regarded him. "No, sir. I merely stated a possibility and allowed your habits to confirm it." Paige's voice broke. "Did you kill him?" Kroll looked at her, and for a moment the calm cracked enough to show contempt. "He killed himself," he snapped. "With that plan, with that arrogance, he thought he could vanish and leave me holding the firm together, he thought." Wolfe lifted a hand. "Enough." Kroll's mouth tightened. "I didn't suffocate him." Wolfe nodded. "Correct. You did not place a pillow over his face, but you arranged the world around his death." Even Neil stopped breathing for a second. Wolfe leaned forward, voice firm. "Mr. Heller vanished by choice. He executed the first steps and then met you, because you controlled the harbor light escrow, and because he intended to sever it without destroying his wife. You panicked. You killed him quickly, within hours. Because a living man with a plan is unpredictable. A dead man is manageable." Kroll's face went rigid. "You can't prove the time." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "I do not need to prove the minute. I need only prove necessity." He tapped the receipt and the watch. The room was paid for early. The clock was unplugged deliberately. The medical window was broadened by cold storage. The later sightings were engineered truths to keep the plan credible and to keep you safe while you moved the escrow and tidied the firm. And finally, when your favor chain threatened to speak, you attempted to buy silence. Wolfe's voice hardened. "Your greatest mistake, Mr. Kroll, was believing that time belongs to the man who controls the paperwork. It does not. Time belongs to the facts." Kramer grunted, satisfied. "All right, that's enough. Kroll, you're going downtown." Kroll's eyes swung to Wolfe, full of hate and a thin fear. "You think you've untied it," he hissed. Wolfe's expression did not change. "I have." Kramer hauled him up and took him out. The room felt suddenly larger, as if the air had been holding its breath, and now was allowed to expand. Paige sat down slowly, eyes wet but steady. "So Grant meant to leave," she whispered. "And he died anyway." Wolfe's voice softened a fraction. "Yes, his plan was real. That is why it was dangerous." Neil rubbed his face. Anger drained into exhaustion. "He apologized," he said hoarsely, "and I thought it meant something." "It did," Wolfe said. "It meant he knew the plan would hurt you. He did it anyway." Reist cleared his throat, timid now. "What happens to the firm?" Wolfe looked at him with distaste. "That is not my concern." He stood, signaling the end. "Mrs. Heller, you may go home. Mr. Rist, you may consult your attorneys. Mr. Heller, you may grieve. Inspector Kramer will enjoy his paperwork." They left, one by one, carrying their own versions of the truth, finally aligned with the facts whether they liked them or not. When the door closed, Wolfe sat back down and reached for a book, as if murder were merely an interruption between chapters. I watched him a moment. "Wolfe," I said, "you never did tell them the final meeting location." Wolfe's eyes did not lift. "There was no such line." I stared. "You lied." Wolfe's mouth tightened. I baited. I grinned, despite myself. That's a nicer word. Wolfe turned a page. "Mr. Goodwin, if you insist on moral commentary, you may do it elsewhere." I leaned back in my chair, felt the familiar comfort of the brownstone returning. The quiet, the order, the sense that Wolfe's world could be restored, even after the city tried to smear it with human greed. Outside, a bus rumbled past on 35th Street, keeping its own schedule, indifferent to vanished men and staged clocks. Inside, Wolfe read, Fritz clinked something in the kitchen, and Saul's voice came from the hall, quiet and exact. "They're gone now," I said. Saul paused. Whoever was watching. Wolfe did not look up. "Let them remember," he said. And I found myself thinking, not for the first time, that in New York the worst lies don't shout. They keep time.